Alright, I'm going to talk about the next pattern I'm coming out with. It's a laptop messenger style bag. Has all kinds of options. You can use these quick clips that I got on this one right now, but I also have it in the pattern pack where you can do just buckles here with the standard tabs. Especially if you want to carry it around by this handle quite a bit, I'd probably suggest using those tabs with just the standard buckle. You'll have the option of doing backpack straps, and I'll have all that in the pattern pack, and there's a couple options with that too, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But right now I have just the standard shoulder strap on here, and you'll have a couple options with this even. Right now it's got the padded one on here, and you can do just a standard version as well if you want to simplify that a little bit. On the inside, you're going to have this first pocket with a zipper. You're going to have these two front panels are good for paper. You'll get some papers back in this area here too. And then it's got two main compartments on top of that. And the centerpiece has a cell phone pocket, 3 spots for pens, a couple card slots, credit cards or business cards. And I put on the backpack straps. This one is the padded version where it's real close to the back of the bag. There's also a version where you can have these two straps elongated, so let's say you're a disc golfer and you want to make nice backpack straps for your disc golf bag, you can do that. Or if you want this bag to ride lower on your back, it's a little bit easier on your spine. Nice padded, ergonomically designed. And you can also do the simplified version of these backpack straps. That's all going to be in the pattern as well. So instead of doing like 3 layers here with the padding and then this little strip around the outskirts and then the main section, you can do just like a piece of 10 ounce or a piece of 9 ounce or something. The other thing I did with this bag, just to simplify things, is instead of waiting until everything was sewn together and then trying to sand and file these edges down and then finish the edges, I just cut all the parts out, dyed them, and finished all the edges prior, so that I just put it together like a puzzle, easy, and looks pretty good. So then you don't have, it doesn't, even though it's thick right here, it doesn't look like it's quite as much bulk because you can see that it's 2 separate pieces. But now you can use anything from a 3 ounce to a 6 ounce. I'd really suggest going something thinner on the boxing, 3-4 ounce. And then for some of this tougher stuff like the straps and the main sections and stuff, maybe go higher, 5 or 6 ounce. But really anything from the 3 to a 6 ounce will work for anything. The only thing I would keep in mind is for like the shoulder straps and things like that, and these tabs that these buckles and things are attached to, you probably want to go a little bit thicker, like a 5 or a 6 ounce at least, just to make sure you have that durability. This is the other version of those backpack straps. These front sections are quite a bit longer, and I have it attached to one of my disc golf bags I made quite some time ago. So you can see when you wear this one, it sits quite a bit lower on your back, so it's not pulling you back as hard. A lot of disc golfers prefer these kind of straps. This is also the simpler version of the pattern. I didn't put the padding and stuff on here, so it was a little bit quicker to make. But all of that will be in this pattern for that laptop bag as well. Although I will also have a pattern pack that I'm going to release with just the shoulder straps and the backpack straps and things for people to buy. They will come with the laptop bag, but I'm going to offer that separately, and the video for these backpack straps is going to be separate as well. So I'll put a link up so you can get right over to that if you're looking to make these. I'll be doing a giveaway with this purse I made in one of my other videos. All you have to do is make sure you're subscribed to my channel. If you like this video and comment below, I'll announce a winner maybe in a couple weeks or something. It's got the lining and everything in it. There's one other thing I'd like to go over. This rain cover isn't going to be in the pattern, but it's I was thinking maybe I'll make a video on this down the road or something here. But there's a couple snaps that snap to actually a different pair of shoulder straps I have for my disc golf bag here. But there's some elastic around so you can still get into your bag, and it covers it up, so while you're wearing it, the rain cover covers everything in your bag. This one's even got some extra snaps right in the back here for an extra towel and stuff. There's actually a snap on each side. And I was thinking I might do a video on how to make these. So you could custom make a rain cover for that laptop bag or anything, backpacks or whatever. Let me know what you think. I did want to mention, while you're cutting the parts out, for parts like this, you want to start in that point and work your way out. If you're cutting with a utility knife, tipping it up a little bit will give you a little more play in the curves. So you get a nice clean cut. I want to show how I go around these corners real quick. Sharp blade. And I'll make sure to tip it up so less blade is in the leather. And I'll use my middle finger here and press, and I slowly turn around that corner. Staying right on that line, making sure the blade's straight up and down. And by twisting and using that finger, it won't be as jagged because you're getting more resistance, and if you're just pulling with your arm, it's going to slip and get real jagged. Get a lot cleaner looking corner doing it that way, if you're using this blade, that is. So start with a zipper here. I'm using double stick basting tape. You can glue it or whatever you want to do to keep it in place. Pressing it down right on the edge here, and when I get to where the zipper head is, where it's kind of spread apart, once I get the tape up to that point, I'll move it down a little so that it's nice and straight. And what I like to do then is to bring this to the end, figure out where it's going to be when it's completely zipped closed. Get it close, and then this one kind of locks down, and I'll peel these off and stick this in place. It's easy for this to want to spread apart, so just make sure it stays straight. You just don't want it covering up the holes on the back. So when I thread needles, I go through a little bit, and you want to go back on the thread and put the needle through it to lock it in place. That way you're not fighting with it the whole time you're trying to sew. So every stitch I'll come through the same way from behind, and then make sure I'm holding it the same way. In this case, I'll hold it away from the zipper and come from the top. So every stitch will look nice, like a machine thread, when it kind of staggers the whole way. Otherwise, if you just haphazardly go at it, the stitches will be kind of misshapen and weird the whole way through. And before I come up through the back, I'll pop a little hole from the front so I know right where to place this needle. You use the tape. These needles might get a little sticky, but you can use some rubbing alcohol and get that crud off of there. You can already kind of tell how every stitch has that angle to it. The zipper's sewn on. I think I prefer the glue method. The tape works, but the needles get kind of gummy. Next, I'll sew these two panels. These are for these latches that I'll be using. You can skip these holes and skip these panels, if you're just going to put a buckle there, which is also in the pattern, and then these will actually be hidden behind a buckle to still have that fancy look to it and all. You can put this into a stitching pony or something, which can speed the process up for you. Now I'm going to put these clasps on here. As long as they are centered and close to the bottom of this square, you'll be good, because the straps and the buckles come straight into the center of these. So that's all you need to worry about, is getting them centered and towards the bottom. So what I'll do is hold this right where I want it, give it a press. Make sure these little prongs are straight, coming straight off of this thing. Give it a little press. And that's where you want to do your holes. And make sure the holes are centered, but also no wider than the thickness of these little prongs. Actually, if they do get a little bigger, it's not going to be a huge deal, because we'll go through the back of this, and then it's going to have a reinforcement part. So I cut these little slits in here for these two parts. Let's see, I got them right up to that bottom edge. You're going to put this little plate. You can usually feel a little ridge. I like to put that ridge down so there's nothing sharp if you're putting your hands in the pockets. But I will glue these. I've been using this stuff just for the sake of these videos, because I do prefer contact cement, but that stuff's real stinky and I have a glue table set up for that. This stuff does work as long as you don't plan on getting this wet. Fold them edges down good. I like to make sure it's good and straight. You can mess with it again here in a couple minutes, but I do put a decent amount of glue in there. I find just kind of, you know, fill in those little gaps and things. It just helps solidify everything. And I back that whole thing with another piece of leather, just to really make sure everything stays nice and still. Spread the glue around. Make sure there's no glue on your hands when you come back to the front of this. You will get some play so you can get this straight on there. Yeah, usually I'll let this get tacky first before I press these together, but this keeps popping up sometimes, just so it'll form for you, a little bit of water. Next I'm going to sew these pockets into this middle piece. This is the piece that's the divider inside of the bag, and it helps to bend the foam pocket a little bit first. That'll go here. There's a couple card pockets and a pen holder. So at the edges of this phone pocket there's extra holes to kind of hold everything down along the edges. So you're going to start in that hole, work your way onto this piece, get that down. These card pockets also will have that extra hole over the edge. Same with the pen holder here. So I'll sew these parts on and then throw a picture or a video of that. So I did the first stitch is this bottom one, so that I can kind of pull these down. And again, remember that last hole on the back part isn't going to be matched up with the first hole on the pocket itself. There's going to be that extra hole, so I can go over the edge on the top and the bottom. And I'll finish that side up to the top there, and again that extra hole just past the edge, and I'll do this side. Next I'm going to put the parts on this is like the back panel and the cover. This is the front. And when you're sewing this to there, make sure you're sewing through all 3 layers. This will help that handle stay more rigid. Now technically you could start anywhere, but I find it easiest to start on the corner, since then you know as long as you follow each hole, everything will line up great. You'll notice as you come around this corner that the part on top, the holes seem to be a little bit further apart, and that's actually on purpose, so that when this is closed it'll sit nicely. So what I'll do is I'll lean this over the edge of a table, or maybe put something underneath it while I'm sewing this down so that it lines up appropriately. So if you get yourself set up, it actually isn't too bad, especially with these bigger parts. Helps quite a bit. Alright, so you're going to have 4 of these. You can see I got a couple clipped already. These are the 4 parts for the backpack straps. I'll be sewing these onto that main flap section. I'll spray a little water in there so I can get that fold good. Contact cement works great. I'm using this stuff. It works alright. Pretty good. Using this because it's non-toxic. I don't have to go to my glue table and wear gloves and vent and all that kind of stuff. So for the sake of the video, I'll use this stuff. As long as your bag's not getting wet, I don't think this stuff has any problems to it. It's not quite as strong as that contact adhesive, but it'll do the trick. Usually I'll give that just a minute. I'll put glue on the other one, let this tack up a little bit, but I'll just go ahead and do this now. Put a needle through there so I can line this up. Make sure those holes match up. You can put weights on it. You can use clips. I'm going to be using some clips. Make sure this is centered in the back there. And then just let that sit and dry. I'll do this last one. Okay, I got this sewn on. You can see that it's got a little bit of a bow to it. So I'll sew that on, sewing through all 3 layers. And that will really help make this rigid so that handle will do its job. So again, what I'll do is set a box under here so that the edge of this is hanging over enough so I can get started right here. First I'll do this center section, and then I'll do these two side sections separately from that. I like to start on the corner, so I make sure I start right on the right hole here. Like I did before, if you feel underneath where that thread is, you can usually pop right up through the next hole. Or you can use this needle. If you put this needle through, you can feel that on the back side. Follow that up through the hole. I got the center sewn on. And you can wait to put this handle on, but I'm going to pop these rings off and just put the handle on now. Slip the D-rings on. I'm going to start in this corner. I start in this corner because I'll go down around there and then continue all the way around that side and finish that side. I can tie the knot and tuck it underneath here. This would be a good one to put in your stitching pony. If you want to glue it too, you can put some glue on here. Okay, I'm just finishing up coming across. I think just to make it look a little fancier, I'm going to go back and forth across these holes too. Just to add a little bit of an extra detail. So on the back side, I'm going crosses, going across. And on the front side, I'm just going straight across. And this one's going to come across and meet in there. So I'm going to tie a knot and then tuck it in between this thread. I'll fold that knot in and push it in right into here. So I just used a standard box knot, and then I'll go in between that stitch right there. Just kind of open it up a little bit. Start pushing those in. And once I get those ends in there, that knot that's right here will fold right over and chuck right in there too. What I do is I put a little dab of glue on the tip of this needle. Doesn't take much at all. And try not to get it on the edges or the sides until I get as far in there as I can. Give a little spin to get it on that knot and in there. And I'll wipe any excess off that's by the edge. Usually give it a tap or two. There's the handle. Here's the handle. I actually ended up spinning these around. I wanted them to be this way. Okay. Now I'll finish sewing these two sides down and start on the next step. Okay, handle's on there. Now I'm going to put these backpack tabs on, and we already went over the gluing of these. I've got the two larger ones that go on top and two smaller ones that will be going down in these bottom corners here. So I grabbed my ammo case here to add another box so I have it kind of across here, and I like to start stitching at one of these points, so then I know I'll be at the right hole. So if I just start in the center somewhere around here, I could be off one, and the last thing I want to do is have to pull all these stitches back out. And once I get this a few stitches in and locked down, I'll throw this in my stitching pony and finish this up. What I usually do too is when I bring this needle up from underneath, I like to bring the thread to the inside of whatever I'm sewing, and by just always doing that, I'm making it a lot more likely that all my stitches will lay nice. If I just kind of do it whichever way I feel as I'm doing each part, then I could switch halfway through and not even know it. So I use this needle to find the hole from underneath. I'll come to the inside. So I'll get a couple more stitches and throw this in my stitching pony, then I'll do all four of these. Okay, so let's sew the two gussets onto this centerpiece. The main thing is to make sure that the middle of this goes to this seam. So that would be wrong. We need this one flipped around so that those two are together. And if you line one up with the edge like that, that's how it's going to be sewn on. So then this one is just going to be flipped around this way. That way when these open up, you'll be able to sew that tab on there. So this is how it's going to go. A little bit tricky holding three parts all at once. But once you get a few stitches in, it really helps hold everything into place. And this is personal preference, but I like to go around the top of the parts with a stitch to hold those edges all together. So I'll continue all the way around. Okay, I got a few stitches. Just again pointing out that when these two parts open up, you'll be looking at those stitching holes for the tab. This is one of the few occasions where every stitch doesn't need to be angled just right on each side of the thread type of thing. Just as long as you get it good and snug. As you're stitching these boxing pieces on, check every once in a while, make sure everything's still lined up and you're going through all three layers. And when you get to a corner, it's just a matter of taking one stitch at a time and making sure you hit each one of those next holes in each one of those pieces. And then with each stitch, get it nice and snug. And now when you're farting around with this, when you're messing around with this corner, these stitches are going to loosen up. Just remember, every time you make a stitch, finish the stitch, get it good and tight, and then do the next one. The other thing with these too, the only thing you need to make sure not to do, just make sure this is out of the way and make sure not to go through the previous thread, because if you start going through the thread, that's going to weaken that spot and it's potentially going to break on you. Just get it tight with each stitch. I'm trying to form it a little bit prior. But since I didn't seal these with acrylic Resolene, they're a little bit floppier than these pieces. So it should have a nice form to it regardless. Just one stitch at a time and eventually it'll all fall into place. See, it keeps loosening up. But when I snug it, see, I'm starting to get around that corner nice. When I snug it so many stitches back, that one's not going to loosen up. So each time I go, yeah, it's loosening back like 3-4 stitches, but that fifth stitch or whatever, that's going to stay tight. So just make sure every one you go, tighten it up. Don't make sure, or don't try to keep every stitch tight as you're going. Just let it loosen up. Okay, I'm getting around this corner, but you'll probably notice if you just tighten it up, this fold isn't where you want it to be. So you might need to grab a modeling spoon or something and tuck that fold in where you want it, and then snug it up again. So that it forms nicely around that corner. The trick is to just take your time and make sure things are where you want it. See, what you want is for it to be nice and smooth around that corner without the stitches showing. You can see here, the stitches are starting to show. So as I go a couple more, I'll do that again and just tuck that in and press it in as I tighten those stitches. If you need to give it just a tiny spritz of water, go for it. I'll dry off this back panel. I don't need that to get wet. Just this corner here. So you can put a little water on your finger, put it right where you want that stretch. Get that corner formed in there a little bit. Doesn't take much, just a little bit of water will help give you that little bit of stretch you need. Just to get that corner formed. It's a little bit of a struggle, but take your time and it'll look real nice when you're done. Nice sharp looking corner. You know, something I could have done and something that I suggest is if you think there might be a couple stitches showing, if you're having issues with corners, use a dark brown thread or whatever color that you colored your stuff. That way if you get just a little bit of something showing, you won't see that white thread sticking out. So if I peel this apart, I might see a little bit of it. Make sure these stitches are good and tight, and you'll have a better chance of getting that corner to look real nice. Got the boxing on here, and you can see when it opens up, you have the holes centered for the tabs there. Form that pocket with a piece of wood or your phone. You could also cut a little thumb hole right here if you wanted to be able to grab it, or maybe just an oval right here, not all the way through to the top, so that you can grab it right here, pull it up enough to grab it. And now that that's done, I'm going to start on the boxing for this part, the front small pocket. And I forgot to mark the center on the bottom here, and I like to keep all my templates after I cut them out just in case, which is good, so I can just lay this right back on here and mark this center hole, because that's where we're going to want to start the seam for the boxing. So I'm going to start right in that center hole, and then lay the boxing on there, and the very next hole is going to be the first hole in the boxing, because that center hole is in between the two layers. And you'll notice there's a little notch cut out on the pattern as well. Thread won't spread the two ends of the boxing part, but once we get around, we'll do like a cross stitch or something. And again, it takes a couple stitches to get this going, so it's holding in place, but once it gets held down, it goes pretty quick. And then these stitches are going to show, so again we're going to want to make sure each time we come up through and pull that to the inside of the part away from the edge. Go all the way around, and again, if you need to get this boxing a little bit wet behind here as you go around this corner to help form it, and press that seam allowance in as you're tightening those stitches, do so. So I'll probably throw this in my stitching pony and finish this up. These corners will be a little bit easier than the corners on this, since this had a double side to it. This centerpiece couldn't really form to one or the other boxing, whereas now this pocket will be able to come together and form a nice curve. So you probably won't have to try to manipulate that corner as much. See if we get that on there. All the stitches are across the front, and I pulled this to the back, and I'm going to tie a knot here first and then finish across here, because when you're going across here, you don't want to pull the stitches as tight as you would across here, just enough to hold them together snugly. And if I don't do that, there's a chance that this could start to pull together and want to like overlap a little bit. Alright, I finish this up. Put some extra stitches across there. Now we'll stitch this onto the front panel. Just make sure the zipper goes to the top flat side. And when I'm tying these knots, you know, sometimes if you do a standard box knot, it'll like loosen up, so then those first couple stitches there are going to be loose. But if you take your thread and go through it once and then twice, it snugs up and stays tight, as long as you don't mess with it much. And then I just go a couple with the standard box knot and a dab of glue. So what I can do again, just to make sure I start on the right hole, is use this to mark that center hole. Or if you look at the corners, you can try to match the corner hole up, but I prefer to start marking a hole, and I have it marked on this as well. Since I pre-marked the top hole, I'll probably just start at the top. But if you don't mark this ahead of time, the gusset here, this seam here will mark where that center hole is, and you can use that template to mark the center hole, and then line that seam right up with that center hole and go around from the bottom. It might be hard to get this one in the stitching pony, so what I'll do is go off the edge of the table. What I did is the edge of this boxing, I took a wool dauber and just went around the edge as if I was getting it wet to burnish the edges, because these aren't sealed yet, and that water absorbed it a little bit. I didn't go overboard. That way I can get some good stretch on this as I get around these corners and stuff. I didn't get like in the holes wet at all, just on that edge, just enough to give it a little bit. Just kind of pre-stretch that edge a little bit. You can see as I came around the bottom side of this, I just went across as if that slit wasn't even there. Everything gets held down nice, and that's why those notches are there. Otherwise it doesn't look quite as clean. All done with the front pocket. I put a little bit of stuffing in there just to kind of help form it. probably put a little bit of weight on there just to hold it in the shape. Let it kind of set while I'm working on other stuff. So on the 2 tabs for the shoulder straps next. As you can see, one of the holes is right where that spine is going to be. So what I do is that spine is in between these 2 holes here. I'll start on this side and do this very first hole. Without attaching it to the bag. Like that. So now when this needle goes through this hole, it's also going to go through the bag here. I'll continue all the way down to this point, and I'll show you what I do at this point now, since that very center hole isn't there either. Okay, so I pulled those stitches back out. So now instead of going in between and through, I'll just go through the tab and that's it. Now for these next couple stitches, you don't want to pull them too tight because it's going to bunch that little end up. And you'll come up right there, and now this stitch will start going through the holes in the gusset again. Finish them up. You just meet right back up to here. This one will just go through into the back, and I'll just tie it in a knot. A little dab of glue on there. You can back stitch and do whatever method you prefer. Actually, I think what I'll do is come in between these 2 layers, tie a knot, and tuck it down in there. Alright, got both of these tabs on here. So now what I'll do is I have 2 of these parts. One's going to go on each side, and you're going to sew this gusset to the inside row of these holes. It's going to go on the inside row of these holes, because these parts are a little bit larger than this center part. So each of these parts, the nice side will be facing in, because after both of these are on each side, there's going to be a secondary part that goes to the outside of this. That one with the pocket will go on the front, and then that big flap will go across the back, and that will make 2 paper pockets as well. So make sure the inside, the nice side goes to the inside. And again, make sure you're going to this inner row of holes. And these stitches will be covered as well. So you can use a dark thread if you want. So this can be kind of tricky. So what I did is I wedged up my stitching pony, put something under the edge to put it at an angle, and just held onto this part so it's holding it up out of the way. Just make sure you're pulling these stitches real tight. These are the hidden ones here. Okay, still sewing on this panel. Kind of tricky because you got to put your hand in here and find the hole. What I do is I just kind of lift this up just enough to see where I'm coming from. It'll actually come out the hole. and then go through this one. If I can get it in there, cool. If not, I'll actually just come through the one hole and then go through into the inside. Make sure it's kind of tucked, and I'll pull it real tight, good and tight. That way, like 5 stitches back, that's going to tighten up real tight. Even though these first ones are going to loosen up, it'll only loosen up back so far back. So even though I'm lifting this up a little, probably the most cumbersome part of this task is going around those corners. And once you get around that corner, if you don't feel like it's tight enough, again, make sure you grab this and tuck that in there. And if it's not tight enough, once you get past it, you can grab underneath one of these threads, push this to tighten it, and just work your way 1 stitch at a time until you get close enough to the end to pull it through. Just got to make sure you get that tight enough. Your other option too is, this is kind of a hard step here. If you don't want to try to tackle this, getting your hand in there and lining everything up, what you can do is cut this out along here so it's just a strip with the 2 holes and a seam allowance that comes onto this side too. It'll make it easier for you to get in there. Now you won't have the 2 pockets here and here for like papers and stuff, but it might make it a little bit easier. So I got it just a little bit moist on the gusset back behind here again, and what I'll do is I'll come up to this corner, so what I'll do is I'll fold that in and try to get it to already want to be in that shape to begin with. Makes it a lot easier. Makes it a lot easier when you're coming through there sewing that down if it's already in that shape somewhat. You can see it's already wanting to get right into that shape and pull in there nicely. Alright, got this side sewn on. You can kind of bend that gusset a little bit, get it straighter. You'll want to get it out of the way for when you sew the front panel. You may want to get in here and form the corner a little bit. Do the same thing to this side. The good side of this piece will be facing in, and make sure you're sewing it to the inner row of holes. Like right here, it's easier for me to go through the gusset and then through this panel instead of trying to hit both holes simultaneously, trying to line them up. But then when I go back through, just follow that thread through both. Make sure I get a good tight. Okay, so both of those panels are on here, and then first I looked at the centerpiece and made sure that all these little pockets, cell phone pocket, were facing this way, facing the front, which is the side I'm going to put this front pocket on. And you just lay that down right on top, and those outer stitches will fit those outer stitches on that first part. Just go all the way around. So I'm just working that front panel on, and I wanted to point out that I keep my finger underneath this needle before I switch hands. And then when I come back through, I make sure I'm pressing up so I'm not scratching along here or nicking this, and don't let go until it's in this hand. Pull it tight. I don't have to pull as tight as I did with these gussets, but I still want to make sure it gets good and snug. Another thing I did is I threw some stuffing in there just to kind of hold it as it's sitting on the table nice. Makes it a little easier for the holes to stay lined up while I'm stitching this together. And Next will be the back part, which is also the flap that goes around the whole top. Alright, so first I'm going to get those decorative stitches across the front of here. I'll show you how I start that, and we'll do those tabs. Alright, so this is the front of the bag, where these stitches are just decorative. So what I'll do is I'm not going to go across this edge here. I'm going to go underneath it. I'll continue around the whole front of the bag, and then I'll tie a little knot and tuck it underneath this piece. Okay, I'm putting these two tabs on the front of the flap, and you can see I started in that very first hole. That'll be the one stitching it to the flap itself. I started on that hole, went all the way around, and finished on that hole. And this string will actually come up out of that hole first, because there won't be a hole behind there for it to go through and then come back up. So that's as far as you go with that, and then you just start stitching it to the front. Alright, so I got all the way around, and this is the last hole there that's punched through this. So the thread that went down through this hole, I came up, but instead of coming all the way through both, I came in between the two. And then with this one, instead of going all the way through, which I could, I go in between the two. That way I'll tie this knot, and I'll be able to push it in between these two stitches that will hold it in there. Right, both tabs are on the front. So what I'll do here is come up in between those two layers through that last hole in the corner of that part. So this hole here, the first one that's showing, that's the first hole in the gusset here, or that panel actually I should say. So this thread that's on the inside, I'll come not on the inside of the gusset here, but on the outside of the bag through that panel. It's going to go through that very top hole and then out that first hole here. And then this one will go right back through it. It's a little hard to keep everything lined up for the first few stitches here, but once you get going it'll be fine. Like so. We'll follow that all the way around the edge. At first glance it would look real hard to get these stitches around since we got that D-ring there. But if you just take your time, just kind of work it around that. It's not as bad as you would think. I got the back sewn on, which turns into the front flap here. Next I'll show you how to make these clasps. Now in the pattern I also have the option for just doing standard buckles. That way if you really plan on using the handle a lot to carry this around, you should probably just put buckles here, because these aren't as strong as just having a straight up buckle. And the handle also has two more parts that you can cut out to thicken the handle up and to reinforce the handle itself too if you want to. This is just the thin version. Alright, so these are the two buckles that are going on the front of the bag, but like I showed you, I'm going to have these latches underneath. The billet will come through the buckle and cover that latch up, so it'll still look like it's just a buckle bag, but it'll be quick release, easy to go. Now if you're going to be carrying it around with the handle on the top all the time with a lot of weight in there, I probably wouldn't do these. I'd go with just a straight up buckle. and that setup is in the pattern as well. So you have a couple choices as far as that goes. So what I need to do first, this is the piece that goes through the buckle there. I need to make sure it's the right size to fit into here. So what I'll do, okay, so this is the buckle that's going on the front of the bag, and I'm doing the version where it'll have the easy latches. The billet will come through that buckle and cover that up, so it'll still have that nice look to it. If you're going to have a lot of weight in your bag and carry it around by that top handle a lot, I would go with just the buckle option that's in the pattern. Skip these things. The first thing I need to do is get this to fit in there. And you're always better off skiving a little bit at a time, because you can always skive more, but if you skive too much, there's nothing you can do about it. But I already have a good idea of how much I need to skive off from making these, so I should be able to get pretty close first time around. Yeah, that's still just a tiny bit snug. Snug but not too tight. So I'll put this buckle in here. I'm going to sew that down, put a little bit of glue in between these two layers and on the end here, and stick it in here. And I'll put them two little screws through the back. And I'll make two of these. Okay, I got both of these done. I just put some glue in there. And what you want to make sure is that the buckle's facing the right way. And then when you slide this on, the latch is on the top, so that it'll be. While I'm screwing these little screws in, I just make sure they're just far enough in to where they're flush on the back. Otherwise it'll catch and scratch on that hardware. Third hole I usually go for. Seems to be about right. Instead of having to do these buckles every time, got that quick release underneath. This pattern comes with the backpack straps, but this video is only going to cover the shoulder strap. And you can skip the inlay if you want and just go with this piece, and instead of cutting this part out this way, you would just cut this part out without cutting the center out and doing that second row of holes, and you would just stitch the two pieces together. So basically it would be two of these, only one of them would have these slits in it for the strap to go through. So I'm going to cover this inlay. Just a minute. And when you're cutting a pattern like this out, you want to keep your scissors flush to the skin. You don't want to just haphazardly cut across. You're going to tear into a lot of this, and if some of this is folded way over, it could get too short where you need it to be long. So when you cut this, you're going to want your scissors flush with the skin underneath and do little clips. Basically, I'm just trimming it back to where these stitch holes are. The leather, once it's on there, will go past it, but I don't want to trim to where the leather is going to be. Just to the stitch holes is enough. Get rid of some of this bulk, that way when that piece comes in here, you'll have a nice edge right just right on there, perfect. I'm going to go back and do these holes on here now. I make sure that's kind of out of the way as best as I can, and then I make sure to slide it up to the edge of a board. You could use a piece of leather or the edge of a cutting table or something. Get that wool out of the way. Feel any get under there, stop, push it out of the way. And I might even raise this up a little bit so that I can just slide it right up and it's at the right height, because right now I gotta press it down. First thing we're gonna do is sew the insert into that. And if you look, you can see which two holes are on the very high point of that arc. So I'll just line those up. Start with one of those. Now, the tricky part of this is not to get a bunch of that wool stuck in there while you're sewing. I'm pushing this stuff out of the way, holding it down, and I'm pulling lightly, and if I feel resistance I stop right away because the fuzz can get knotted up and wrapped around the thread, but as long as you keep it out of the way it should be pretty good. Make sure nothing's in the way. Tighten the stitch. Okay, I just tie it off, finish it off by tying a knot in the back here. And next we're going to sew it down to this part. So that strap will be coming in here and out here. So what I like to do is I'll put this on and make a couple little marks with a pencil or something, and then put some glue in here. That way, as you're using this and it starts to wear and stuff, this doesn't get too stretched and pulled out. This kind of helps give it some more rigidity. So even beyond that, I'll scoot this down a little bit past the edge so I know that glue won't come anywhere near here. And those are my two marks, but I'll still keep the glue back a little ways. And again, I usually use contact cement, but this stuff works pretty good. Making sure to keep it a ways away from those slits. I'll put this together pretty quick. That way I can slide it around, and I'll put a couple clips on here while that dries. And I'm looking through to make sure those holes are matching up. If you have trouble seeing, put a needle through there and get a hole lined up. When in doubt, add extra clips. Put a little weight on there, I'll press that in there. I'll give that some time to dry, and then I'll just sew around. So I'll get the rest of the shoulder strap situated while the glue dries on that padded piece. So it's going to be two parts where one side, these are 1.5 inch clips and 1.5 inch buckles. All that will be listed on the pattern pack and in the description of the video. So on this side we're going to put the clasp, and then on this side we're going to put a buckle. So the only thing is making sure the buckles are the right way. So I'll hold them the way they need to be on there and actually come through here just to make sure I get it all on there right. Sew that into place. And then since it swivels, it doesn't really matter how we slide this one on there. Sew that into place. Alright, I got both of these done. I'll wait until I can put that shoulder pad on here, and then we'll install that on the bag. And keep that out of the way, the fluff, as best you can. But I'm just going like this loosely. It's going to grab a bunch. But before I tighten it, just get that out of the way. Give it a tug. Now this will probably leave a little bit of fluff on your shoulder, and it'll shed a little bit for a few days. And if you want to watch the video on how to make the shoulder strap, or this is the shoulder strap, if you want to watch the video on how to make the backpack straps, I'll put a link down below and at the end of this video. Okay, sew this onto the back. So I'll put the strap through here. Alright, that's done. I will be making the video for the backpack straps, which will be attached to the back side of this. And if you grab just the pattern of the backpack straps, I'll also include the pattern for the single shoulder strap. So you'll have, and they both will, this one clearly can attach to any bag, but that shoulder strap one, as long as you have 2 points and 2 points, that can be attached to any backpack or bag. It will also have the pattern, so this will ride high up on your back like a backpack would, or you can do it so these are elongated. It'll have the option of that pattern, so it'll be long for like a disc golf bag, or if you want a bag like this, or something to ride lower on the back, it's a little bit less strain. So that'll be like an option for that pattern as well.